Hi guys, sorry to interrupt your viewing, but please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.
The first time I knew Caitlyn was going to get everything she ever wanted was at her 7th birthday party, when I was 10 and already old enough to see the difference between what we had and what they had. She had this ridiculous 2-tier cake covered in plastic Barbie dolls, a bounce house in the yard, a pony, yes, a real goddamn pony, and over 50 kids running around screaming with sugar and entitlement. Meanwhile, I stood next to my mom by the fence in my older cousin's hand-me-downs, holding a $2 wrapped book we got at the dollar store. Aunt Denise made some passive-aggressive joke about how thoughtful we were for bringing something educational. I remember because my mom's smile froze in place for the rest of the day. My mom passed away when I was 16, and from that moment on, the balance of power in the family was sealed. Caitlyn and her mother became the emotional nucleus of everything: holidays, reunions, birthdays, hell, even funerals. Uncle Dave, who had once taken me to the park and read me bedtime stories when my dad was too drunk or too gone, slowly pulled away, the way people do when their guilt outweighs their courage. Denise ran everything with the smug efficiency of a queen who thinks she's doing everyone a favor just by showing up. I moved out at 19 and never looked back. Built my own business, from nothing, consulting, mostly, for mid-sized tech firms that didn't know how to get their shit together. I got good at reading people. Real good. It's funny how childhood trauma translates into adult profit when you figure out how to weaponize it. Anyway, back to Caitlyn. She was the kind of girl who always managed to land on her feet, like some glittery-ass cat with a trust fund. After her third attempt at college didn't pan out, she pivoted into being an influencer. I think her big break was getting reposted by a spray tan brand, and from there it snowballed. Trips, partnerships, constant curated happiness. A never-ending carousel of boyfriend of the months who all looked like they'd been printed from the same dish-a-bag template. Despite everything, despite the years of being sidelined at family events, the constant comparisons, the way Aunt Denise once said I was a little too intense for motherhood, I still felt this messed up obligation to keep the peace. Or maybe it was guilt. Guilt that I didn't try harder after my mom died. Guilt that I never visited her grave after the first year. Guilt that maybe, just maybe, the distance I built was my way of making sure I never had to be vulnerable again. So when the family found out Caitlyn was getting married to some guy named Chad or Brad or something equally predictable, everyone acted like it was the second coming. She posted the proposal video on Instagram, naturally. Some drone footage, a beach, tears, sparkles. The whole thing had enough glitter to trigger epilepsy. And suddenly the family group chat was all about color schemes and bridal showers and how exciting it all was. I wasn't even invited to the engagement party. Not that I wanted to go, but it was a message. And I got it, loud and clear. What nobody knew, not Denise, not Caitlyn, not even Uncle Dave, was that 3 months after that beachside proposal, I got a call from a woman named Helen who worked at a venue just outside of Charleston. She said my name was listed as the emergency contact for a reservation, and they needed a backup card because the primary was declined. I was confused at first, thought maybe it was a fraud thing. But then she read the name attached to the event: Caitlyn R. Sanders and Chadwick L. Moore. Wedding date: June 14th. I told her to hold. Sat there for a solid 10 minutes, staring at my phone like it was some kind of portal to another dimension. Then I called her back and gave her my business card number. $32,000. That's what it cost to rent that damn plantation-style wedding venue with the long oak drive and chandeliers in the barn. $32,000. I could have said no. Should've. But I didn't. Why? That's a great question. Maybe I wanted to show I wasn't the bitter cousin. Maybe I wanted to feel like I could still do something meaningful for the family, even if they never saw it. Or maybe it was just muscle memory. When you grow up being told you're not enough, you keep trying to prove you are, long after anyone's watching. I never told them. Not a soul. Paid it in full. Told Helen to keep it anonymous. She sounded a little confused. But she agreed. It's not the weirdest request she's probably gotten. I let it go. Moved on. Until the invitations went out. First it was in the group chat. Cousins posting photos of those fancy little envelope boxes with hand-tied ribbon and wax seals. I waited. And waited. Nothing came. A week passed. Then 2. Finally, my younger cousin Alicia, barely 21 and obsessed with Instagram, posted a story of her invite, captioned, "Can't wait to see the princess get her castle." I messaged her and asked if everyone was invited. Her answer? Yeah, all the cousins are going. Caitlyn said she wanted it to be super family-focused. I checked my mailbox again. Just bills and a flyer for a senior Zumba class. That was the moment I realized I hadn't been invited. Not forgotten. Not an oversight. Straight up excluded. Intentionally. After I paid for the goddamn venue. $32,000 out of my pocket. And they didn't even want me in the room. And the worst part? I wasn't surprised. Not even a little. I wish I could say I ignored the wedding day completely, that I took the high road, went out for brunch, drank bottomless mimosas, and danced with strangers under disco lights while my cousin waltzed into her delusion of perfection. But the truth is, I watched it. Alone. On my laptop. In my apartment. Wearing a hoodie I'd had since grad school, with my cat asleep on my feet and a bottle of red wine sweating on the coffee table. The live stream link had been shared on the family group chat by Denise herself, a public broadcast of a private event that somehow managed to be both smug and saccharine in every frame. Caitlyn walked down the aisle in a gown that probably cost more than my first car, flanked by a line of bridesmaids in blush, tulle, and anxiety. The venue looked immaculate, the chandeliers glittering like everything she ever wanted, and I knew, with a twist in my stomach, that I had paid for that glimmer. That slow-motion shot of her stepping through the double barn doors with fake tears and a bouquet the size of a small tree? I funded it. The carefully staged backdrop with cascading white roses? My money. The mahogany chairs with gold sashes? Paid in full. There wasn't a single thing in that shot that didn't have my fingerprints on it, except for me. And as they rattled off names during the reception to thank friends, vendors, her Pilates instructor, the caterer who just got her, my name was nowhere in sight. Not even in the "those who helped make this possible" part of the speech, which, let me tell you, went on for 10 goddamn minutes. They even thanked the DJ's dog because he'd been through so much this year. After the 3rd glass of wine and the 5th time watching Caitlyn's new husband try to shove cake in her mouth like he was guiding a shovel, I slammed the laptop shut. I didn't cry. That would have been too easy. What I felt was harder. It was the kind of anger that simmers behind your ribs for years, the kind that waits for a moment like this to finally start hissing through the cracks. 3 days passed, and I said nothing. No snarky messages, no petty Instagram unfollows. I went about my life like everything was fine. Then, on a random Tuesday at 2 in the afternoon, Caitlyn texted me. "You missed my big day. Where were you?" It stared back at me from my screen like a joke from the universe, like the kind of punchline that isn't funny because it's real. I stared at it for a full 2 minutes, my thumb hovering over the screen. I even laughed a little. Not the nice kind of laugh, but the kind that sounds like you finally snapped, like something inside you just cracked open and let the cold light in. I replied without thinking. Didn't think you'd want the person who paid for your venue showing up unannounced. Simple. Precise. No fluff. No emojis. No exclamation points. Just truth, served ice cold, the way betrayal ought to be handed back. Now, here's the part that'll get some of you twitching in the comments. I'm sure, because yeah, I said it. That was the final straw on top of a 100-pound camel. I know it's not the saying. I know the phrase is supposed to be about a camel's back and some singular straw snapping it. But you know what? That camel's been hauling around $32,000 in silent resentment, years of being the family shadow and a warehouse of swallowed pride. So no, it wasn't just a straw. That camel was already broken. Hell, it was damn near flattened. And if calling it a 100-pound camel makes you roll your eyes, then congratulations, you still don't get it. About 10 minutes after I hit send, my phone lit up with a call from Aunt Denise. I didn't answer. Her name flashed across the screen like an old scar flaring up during bad weather. I could practically hear her voice already sharp, high, and trembling with the kind of rage only people who've never been told no can summon. I let it ring until it stopped, then watched as she called again. And again. I turned my phone to silent, grabbed my carry-on, and walked out the door without looking back. My Uber to the airport was already waiting, driver leaning against the car in the hazy orange heat of an early summer evening. I didn't say much on the ride, just stared out the window while my notifications piled up in the background. Missed calls. Voicemails. A group chat now filled with accusations and "WTF did you say to Caitlyn?" messages. But me? I was already gone. On my way to JFK. First class ticket in hand. Destination: Greece. Because when a storm finally breaks loose, you don't stick around to drown in it. You climb on a damn plane and chase the sun until the voices fade and all that's left is the sound of your own breathing. Let them scream. Let them spiral. I paid for her fairy tale, but I didn't sign up for the sequel. The first thing that hit me when I stepped off the plane in Santorini wasn't the heat, although it clung to my skin like guilt on a Catholic, but the silence. This almost sacred hush that wrapped around the cliffs and blue-domed churches like a secret you weren't supposed to hear unless you really listened. The air smelled like salt and crushed lemons, the kind of scent that makes you forget for a second that your whole family back home is probably tearing your name apart syllable by syllable in some group chat titled Fam Bam, or whatever the hell Caitlyn named it last month. I didn't check my phone until I was in the tiny hotel room, barefoot on cool tile, a glass of cheap local wine sweating in my hand. The Mediterranean glimmered just outside the window, and for one surreal second, it felt like I had finally made it out of the noise. But peace never comes without a price, and mine buzzed back to life the second I unlocked the screen. Voicemails, missed calls, a group thread with over 70 unread messages, and a brand new family rumor with my name on it. The first voicemail was from Denise, naturally. Her voice hit my ear like a slap with a silk glove, soft, controlled, and meant to leave a mark. "Melissa," she started, and that tone alone made me want to throw my phone into the caldera. "I don't know what you think you accomplished, but Caitlyn is devastated. You embarrassed her. You humiliated all of us. And after everything we've done for you," the irony of that sentence almost made me laugh out loud. I didn't finish the message. The next 10 were just noise, people pretending to check in, fishing for gossip, trying to pull a confession out of me like I was on trial, and they were the jury I never asked for. Somewhere in that hellstorm of digital rage, Aunt Denise decided to flip the narrative. Suddenly, I hadn't been excluded. I'd refused to attend unless I was made a bridesmaid. I'd demanded a role in the ceremony. I'd threatened to cause a scene. It was a beautifully twisted lie, delusional, yes, but smart enough to be believed by the ones who needed it to be true. Because that's how Denise works. She doesn't confront the truth. She suffocates it under prettier stories and louder voices. I lay on the bed, staring at the white ceiling fans spinning above me, and the memories started creeping in not dramatic ones, not the kinds you build entire therapy sessions around, but the small moments, the quiet humiliations that add up over time like water dripping on stone. After my mom died, things shifted. Subtly, at first. Aunt Denise started hosting the holidays. Caitlyn got the seat at the adult table, even though I was older. When I graduated high school, my cake was store-bought, my photo shoved next to the potato salad. When Caitlyn turned 16, they rented a damn boat and threw her a party that looked like an MTV special. I told myself it didn't matter, that I was the tough one, the self-sufficient one, the girl who didn't need applause or affection. But the truth is, you never stop needing your family to choose you, even when you've learned they probably never will. That pain came with me, tucked neatly between my passport and a paperback I wouldn't read. It lived in my luggage, heavy and familiar, a second skin I couldn't quite unzip. I walked into town that evening, letting the golden hour stretch across the white buildings like something holy, trying to feel something other than tight-lipped bitterness. Tourists took selfies against the cliffs, lovers kissed under linen hats, and children chased each other between tables while waiters smiled like they'd seen it all before. I sat down at a cafe overlooking the sea and ordered grilled octopus and more wine than was advisable, trying to remember who I was before all this mess started to define me. And then, right as the waiter set down the plate in front of me, my phone buzzed again. A single message. Just one. From Uncle Dave. The only one who used to sneak me ice cream when Denise wasn't looking. The man who read me stories about space and told me I was smart before anyone else did. The man who quietly let me fade from the family narrative when it got too complicated. His message said, "You should have just let her have her day, Mel." 12 words. Not cruel. Not even confrontational. But heavy, heavier than $32,000, heavier than years of swallowing it down, heavier than the lie Denise had spread across our bloodline like poison. I stared at it for a long time, watching the words pulse softly on the screen, as if they might change if I waited long enough. But they didn't. They never do. The vineyard wasn't marked on any map I could find, and when I asked the cab driver if he knew it, he squinted at the name for a while before just nodding like it was safer to pretend than to admit confusion. The road to get there wasn't really a road at all, more like a long stretch of gravel held together by stubborn grass and sun-scorched tradition, winding past olive groves and tired stone houses that looked like they'd been watching the sea for centuries. I hadn't seen Sophia in almost 10 years, but she greeted me at the gate like I'd only stepped away for coffee, arms flung wide. Eyes the same pale blue I remembered from college when she used to light cigarettes off stove burners and talk about love like it was an ancient curse that no one really survived. We drank wine in the shade of her pergola, an old wooden structure wrapped in vines so thick it felt like we were sitting inside a storybook. She poured it like water, no measuring, no questions, just a quiet understanding that whatever brought me there wasn't light. It was deep and messy and full of the kind of silence that only comes after years of swallowing the things you wanted to scream. We hadn't even touched the olives or the bread yet when she asked, point blank, "So, who broke your heart this time?" It wasn't a romantic kind of heartbreak, not exactly. It was heavier than that familial betrayal, the slow rot of being forgotten, the ache of doing something good and being punished for it instead of praised. I told her everything, laid it out like a map on the table between us, tracing the roads of resentment with my finger while she sipped and nodded and let me say it all without interruption. When I got to the part about the text, the one Caitlyn sent after the wedding, asking why I hadn't been there, Sophia let out the sharp, bitter laugh and shook her head like she already knew the ending even though I hadn't finished the middle. Then she said something that cracked me open in a way I hadn't expected. If you gave that money to prove something, you lost. But if you gave it for peace, then maybe you won. It hit harder than I thought it would. Maybe because I hadn't decided why I gave it. Maybe because I'd never allowed myself to think about it without also thinking about the injustice of it all. But there was a strange, quiet truth in her words, the kind that settles somewhere in your chest and keeps echoing long after the conversation has moved on. Later that night, back in my hotel room, with the sky turning the same kind of orange that makes you believe in things again, I did what I promised myself I wouldn't do. I went digging through social media. Not for validation, not for revenge, but for something else I couldn't quite name yet. Curiosity, maybe. Or hope. That's when I found it. A video posted to Caitlyn's private story, not public, not meant for wide eyes. Someone else in the family must have screen recorded it and sent it around. The video was taken 2 nights after the wedding, low lighting, poor angle, but her face was clear. No makeup, hair tied up in a knot, eyes red like she'd been crying longer than she'd slept. I watched her inhale once, then say the words I never expected to hear. I thought she hated me. I thought if she came, she'd ruin it. I thought. I don't know, I thought she'd make it about her, like she always used to, just stealing the air out of the room. She paused after that, looked away from the camera, bit her lip like the weight of the lie was still stuck in her mouth. I know she paid for the venue. I found out the morning of the wedding. Mom said it was better if we didn't tell her, that it would just cause drama. I don't know what's real anymore. I just wanted the day to be easy. It was like being sucker punched by softness. I sat there, frozen, the wine untouched on the nightstand, my heartbeat louder than the cicadas outside the window. There was a version of this story I hadn't allowed myself to consider, a version where Caitlyn wasn't just cruel or careless, but scared, misinformed, controlled by the same woman who'd manipulated me into the shadows for decades. She didn't excuse herself. She didn't say sorry. But in those few broken sentences, she said enough to rattle something loose in me that had stayed clenched for far too long. An hour later, another message came through. You left before I could tell you the truth. 7 words. Not a question. Not a plea. Just a fracture in the wall that had separated us for years. And for the first time since I landed in Greece, I didn't know what to feel. I just knew I wasn't done yet. The boat rocked gently beneath my feet, a slow rhythm that matched the weight in my chest, that pulsing ache that had been sitting there like a stone ever since I left home. The water around us was pure fire, the sun melting into the edge of the world like it had nowhere else to be, streaks of orange and gold dragging across the sea like oil on canvas, and for the first time in what felt like years, I didn't feel like I was running. I was just floating, just existing. There was no rush, no guilt, no screaming in the background, no text threads blinking red with demands for explanations, apologies, or forgiveness. The cliffs of Oe stood in the distance, carved into the sky like some ancient monument to the kind of beauty that doesn't ask for attention but still holds it. A group of tourists on the bow whispered and snapped photos, gasping at the sunset like they'd never seen it before. And me? I sat at the edge of the boat with my phone in my lap, Caitlyn's last message still sitting there like a wound that hadn't decided whether to scar or bleed again. You left before I could tell you the truth. Those words had been playing in my head like a scratched record, each syllable louder than the last, each one dragging up another version of her face that I wasn't sure I could trust. Was she crying for what she did, or just for how it looked? Was that video a moment of honesty or a performance for a carefully selected digital audience? I didn't know. I might never know. But I could feel something shifting inside me, something I hadn't allowed in years, curiosity without bitterness, softness without surrender. I opened the message, stared at it again, then did what I knew I had to. I typed out a response. I didn't rush. I didn't rage. I just let the words fall out the way they wanted to. I never needed a spotlight. Just a seat at the table. Then I hovered over send. My thumb held the screen like it knew pressing it would mean I was stepping back into a fire I'd only just walked away from. And in that moment, I heard myself think something I hadn't expected. Sometimes peace means not finishing the conversation. So I deleted the message. Every word. One by one. And then I locked the phone and slipped it into my bag like it had never been there in the first place. The boat started its turn back toward the island, and the cliffs turned gold behind us, the last breath of the sun catching on the rooftops like it was trying to say goodbye. I watched it disappear without flinching, feeling something in me go quiet. Later that night, back in my room, I finally played the last voicemail from Aunt Denise. I had ignored it for too long, but the silence between us had started to rot, and I needed to know if she still sounded like the woman who used to tell me I was too serious for a girl. Her voice hit me like a rusty blade, old, familiar, jagged. The first half was pure fire, the kind of screaming that comes from someone who knows they've lost the power they used to hold so easily. She accused me of destroying Caitlyn's day, of being selfish, vindictive, dramatic. But somewhere near the 3-minute mark, something in her cracked. She loved you, Melissa. She always looked up to you. Even when she didn't know how to show it. Even when I told her not to. The rest was static. Breathing. Silence. A click. I set the phone down and stared at the ceiling, that old familiar pressure in my chest curling tighter again, but this time it didn't come with tears. Just this slow, aching realization that maybe the past couldn't be fixed, only acknowledged. And maybe that was enough. Out of habit, I opened Instagram. Scrolled. Stopped. There she was. Caitlyn. Standing by the water, wind catching her hair in just the right way, her eyes red but defiant, holding a glass of champagne like it might shatter if she blinked too hard. The caption underneath read, "Forgiveness is harder than revenge. But maybe it's worth more." I stared at that sentence longer than I cared to admit. It wasn't an apology, not directly. But it wasn't denial either. It was something in between, something broken and still trying to hold shape. Then my messages blinked. Read disappeared from her last message. And then came a new one. "We need to talk." I let the notification sit there for a long while, the screen glowing in my hand like it might burn a hole straight through my skin if I held on too long. The weight of it was sharp and strange, not painful, not peaceful either. Just heavy with the kind of choice you only get once in a lifetime, the choice between going back or going forward. I didn't open it. I set the phone down, walked to the balcony, and watched the lights across the water flicker like stars that hadn't made up their minds yet. And I breathed. Not for her. Not for them. Just for me.